Grandpa asked, confused. Why are you arriving in an Uber? What happened to the SUV we bought you for your 24th birthday? Before I opened my mouth in shock, my mom smiled. Her sister needed IT more. Everyone froze, and Grandpa did something none of us expected. Why are you arriving in an Uber? What happened to the SUV we bought you for your 24th birthday? My grandfather's voice cut through the crisp Nashville afternoon air like a knife. He stood on the front porch of his beautiful Victorian home, his weathered hands gripping the railing as he watched me step out of the rideshare vehicle. The confusion on his face was genuine, his silver eyebrows knitted together in a way that made my stomach drop. Before I could even open my mouth to respond, before I could process the question that made absolutely no sense to me, my mother appeared in the doorway behind him. She had that smile on her face, that particular smile I had learned to recognize over 24 years of being her daughter. The one that meant she had done something she knew was wrong but had already convinced herself was justified. Her sister needed it more, my mom said, her voice light and casual, as if she were discussing the weather. Brooke just got that new job across town, and with the baby coming she really needed reliable transportation. Everyone froze. My name is Hannah, and I am 24 years old. I work as an assistant manager at a boutique hotel in downtown Nashville, a job I fought tooth and nail to get after graduating from community college 2 years ago. I pay my own rent, my own bills, and I have been meticulously building a life that exists entirely separate from the chaos that has always surrounded my family. But standing there in my grandfather's driveway, watching his face transform from confusion to something much darker, I realized that no matter how far I ran, some things would always catch up to me. What SUV? I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air between us like smoke. My mother's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, that practiced composure sliding back into place. The one Grandpa gave you for your birthday, sweetheart. The black Chevrolet Equinox. Don't tell me you forgot already. I had not forgotten. I could not forget something I never knew existed in the first place. My 24th birthday had been 3 months ago. I had spent it working a double shift at the hotel because we were short-staffed, then gone home to my tiny studio apartment and eaten leftover Chinese food while watching old episodes of cooking shows. My mother had called briefly to wish me happy birthday, the conversation lasting exactly 4 minutes before she mentioned that Brooke needed her to babysit, and she had to go. No mention of any gift, no mention of any SUV, nothing. I never received any SUV, I said, my voice growing steadier as the reality of what was happening began to crystallize. Nobody told me anything about a car. My grandfather's hand tightened on the porch railing until his knuckles turned white. He was 78 years old, but in that moment he looked like a man who could still command an army. Before he retired, he had built a successful construction company from the ground up. And even now, years later, people in Nashville still spoke his name with respect. Patricia, he said, and the single word made my mother visibly flinch. You told me Hannah had the car. You told me she loved it and that she drove it to work every day. You said she cried when she saw it. My mother's composure cracked further. Well, I mean, the situation changed. Brooke really needed it. And Hannah has been doing fine with the bus and ride shares. She's young. She can handle it. Brooke has a baby to think about, and her husband just lost his job at the factory. And you know how expensive everything is these days. I stood frozen in that driveway, watching my grandfather's face cycle through emotions I had rarely seen him display. Confusion gave way to understanding, and understanding gave way to something that looked dangerously close to rage. You gave away a car that I purchased with my own money, he said slowly, each word deliberate, a car that I put in Hannah's name, a car that was my mother said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she always used when she wanted something. We share things in this family. Hannah understands that. She's always understood that. Right, Hannah? She looked at me then, her eyes pleading for me to play along, to smooth things over the way I had been doing my entire life. To be the good daughter who never complained, who never made waves, who always wanted. But something had shifted inside me. Standing there in my grandfather's driveway, wearing clothes I had bought, with money I earned from working overtime, I felt something break. Or maybe it was something finally coming together. Pieces of a puzzle I had been too close to see finally forming a picture I could no longer ignore. No, I said quietly. I don't understand. I never understood. And I'm tired of pretending that I do. My grandfather slowly pushed back from the railing and straightened to his full height. The look he gave my mother made her take an involuntary step backward. Everyone inside, he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had spent decades giving orders. Now, the inside of my grandfather's house smelled the same way it always had, like cedar wood and old books and the faint hint of the pipe tobacco he had given up 10 years ago. But somehow still lingered. I had spent countless weekends here as a child, back before everything became complicated. Back when I still believed that families were supposed to love each other equally. We gathered in the living room, an awkward assembly of tension and unspoken accusations. My mother perched on the edge of the antique sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. My grandmother, Margaret, emerged from the kitchen with a confused expression, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What's all this commotion about?" she asked, looking between us. "Sit down, Margaret," my grandfather said, his tone gentler with her but still carrying an edge. "We need to have a family discussion," and I remained standing near the fireplace, unable to bring myself to sit. My legs felt unsteady, and I worried that if I sat down, I might not be able to get back up. The revelation about the SUV was still sinking in, but it was also unlocking doors in my memory that I had kept firmly shut for years. "I want to understand something," my grandfather said, settling into his leather armchair and fixing my mother with a hard stare. "When I bought that car 3 months ago, I specifically asked you to arrange for Hannah to come pick it up. You told me she did. You told me she was overwhelmed with gratitude. You even sent me a picture of her standing next to it." My heart clenched. A picture. There was a picture. "That picture," I said slowly, "the pieces clicking into place. Was that taken in front of Brooke's house?" My mother's face went pale. "Because Brooke posted a picture of herself with a new black SUV 3 months ago," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "She said her husband bought it for her. Everyone congratulated her. I liked the post." The silence that followed was deafening. Let me explain something about my family, because without context, none of this will make sense. My mother Patricia has always favored Brooke. From the moment my sister was born when I was 4 years old, I became invisible. Brooke was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong. When she struggled in school, tutors were hired. When I struggled, I was told to try harder. When she wanted dance lessons, piano lessons, art lessons, the money appeared from nowhere. When I wanted to join the school band, I was told we could not afford the instrument rental. I learned early to stop asking. I learned to work for everything I wanted. At 16, I got my first job at a grocery store, bagging groceries until my arms ached. I saved every penny, bought my own book. When Brooke wrecked her first car at 17, my parents bought her another one. When I saved enough for a used Honda at 18, my mother borrowed it for Brooke and returned it with a dented fender and no apology. This pattern had continued into adulthood. Brooke got married at 22 in a lavish ceremony that my parents funded entirely. I was not even asked to be a bridesmaid. Brooke announced her pregnancy 6 months ago, and suddenly every family conversation revolved around the baby, the nursery, what Brooke needed, what Brooke wanted. Meanwhile, I worked 50-hour weeks at the hotel, climbed from front desk clerk to assistant manager through sheer determination, and built a life that asked nothing from anyone. I thought I had finally escaped. I thought the distance I had created would protect me. I was wrong. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," my grandmother said, her voice sharp in a way I rarely heard. "You took a gift intended for Hannah and gave it to Brooke, and then lied about it." "It's not that simple," my mother said, her voice rising with desperation. "Brooke needed it. Her husband lost his job, and they have a baby on the way, and Hannah has always been so independent. She manages fine on her own. She always has. Brooke needs help. Hannah doesn't. That's not the point," my grandfather said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The point is that I purchased that vehicle for Hannah. It was registered in her name. I have the paperwork. How exactly did you manage to give it to Brooke when you have no legal authority over it?" My mother's face went through several shades of red before settling on a guilty pink. "I told the dealership there was a mistake with the registration, that it should have been in Brooke's name from the beginning. I had Hannah's information from when she was younger, so you committed fraud," my grandfather said flatly. You forged documents to transfer ownership of property that did not belong to you. It's family, my mother repeated, but the words sounded hollow now, even to her. We take care of each other. Hannah wouldn't have minded if she'd known. She's always been the responsible one. Brooke is the one who needs support. I laughed then. A bitter sound that surprised even me. You didn't even tell me the car existed. How could you know whether I would have minded? You didn't give me the chance to be generous. You just took what wasn't yours to take and gave it to someone else. My grandfather rose from his chair, and for a moment I saw the man he must have been. In his prime, the one who built an empire through hard work and harder decisions. Where is the car now? He asked. At Brooke's house, my mother whispered. She's been driving it for 3 months. My grandfather nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone. Then I believe it's time to correct the situation. The next 30 minutes felt surreal, like watching a movie of my own life from somewhere outside my body. My grandfather made phone calls with a calm efficiency that spoke to decades of business experience. He spoke to lawyers, to the police department's non-emergency line, to someone at a towing company who apparently owed him a favor from years back. My mother tried to interrupt several times, but each attempt was met with a raised hand and a look that could have frozen water. My grandmother sat beside me on the sofa, her hand finding mine and squeezing gently. I always wondered, she said quietly, her voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. There were so many times when things didn't add up. Birthday presents that were never mentioned, Christmas gifts that seemed to disappear. Your grandfather would ask about something he'd sent you, and Patricia would always have an explanation. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. How long? I asked. How long has this been happening? My grandmother's face crumpled with guilt. I don't know for certain. Years, probably. I should have asked more questions. I should have called you directly. But Patricia always had reasons, and I wanted to believe her. The admission hurt more than I expected. All those years of thinking I was forgotten, thinking my grandparents didn't care as much about me as they did about Brooke. All those missed connections and perceived rejections, none of it had been real. It had all been carefully orchestrated by my mother to ensure that Brooke remained the center of everyone's universe. The car will be here within the hour, my grandfather announced, ending his final call. I've also contacted the authorities about the fraudulent transfer, but they've advised me that since I'm willing to resolve this within the family and no financial harm was done to the dealership, we can handle it privately if we choose. Thank you, I said, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what he was doing. Thank you for believing me. My grandfather crossed the room and placed his hands on my shoulders, looking at me with an intensity that made me feel truly seen for the first time in years. I should have been paying closer attention. I should have verified things myself instead of trusting intermediaries. That's my failure, Hannah, and I'm sorry for it. It's not your fault, I said, glancing at my mother, who had shrunk into the corner of the sofa like she was trying to disappear into the cushions. You trusted family. That's not supposed to be a mistake. No, he agreed. It's not, but apparently in this family, trust has been badly misplaced. My mother finally found her voice. This is going to destroy everything. Brooke is pregnant. She's under stress. If you take that car back, it's going to devastate her. Think about the baby. Think about what this will do to the family. I watched my grandfather's face harden at her words. The family, he repeated, his voice cold. You want to talk about family? Hannah is family. She has spent her entire life being treated like an afterthought while you've poured every resource into Brooke. I've seen the way things work. I've seen Hannah show up to holidays and clothes she's clearly worn multiple times while Brooke arrives in designer outfits. I've seen Hannah drive a 15-year-old car while Brooke gets handed new vehicles. I told myself it was because Hannah was more responsible, more frugal. Now I'm beginning to understand. It was because Hannah was given no choice. That's not fair. My mother protested. Brooke has had difficulties. She struggled with things. Hannah has always been capable of taking care of herself because you forced her to be, my grandmother said, and there was a sharpness in her voice I had never heard before. You gave her no other option. And now we find out that you've been stealing from her for years. Gifts we sent. Money we gave for her education, her birthday, her graduation. How much of it actually reached her? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I thought about all the times my mother had mentioned money from my grandparents that I had never received. College funds that mysteriously dried up. Birthday checks that were deposited into accounts I didn't control. The laptop that was supposed to be my graduation gift, but somehow ended up in Brooke's possession because she needed it for her job search. How much? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Over the years, how much has been redirected from me to her? My mother's face was a mask of guilt and defiance. I don't know exactly. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we're family, and family takes care of each other. No, my grandfather said firmly. What matters is that you've committed theft. You've stolen from your own daughter to fund your other daughter's lifestyle, and you've lied to us for years to cover it up. The sound of a truck pulling into the driveway cut through the tension. We all turned toward the window, where a flatbed tow truck was backing up with a familiar black SUV strapped to its bed. That's my car, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. That's actually my car. Yes, my grandfather said. It is, and it always was. The title is being corrected as we speak. Within the week, the paperwork will reflect what should have been true all along. My mother rose from the sofa, her face twisted with emotion. Brooke is going to be furious. She's going to think I betrayed her. She's going to blame me for this. You did betray her, my grandfather said calmly. You set her up to believe she was entitled to things that weren't hers. You enabled behavior that she now thinks is normal. If she's upset, that's a consequence of the situation you created, not of us correcting it. I walked to the window and watched as the tow truck driver began the process of unloading my SUV onto my grandfather's driveway. It was beautiful. A gleaming black vehicle that represents the truth, and had so much more than just transportation. It represented the truth finally coming to light. And somewhere across town, my sister was about to discover that the life she had built on stolen foundations was about to come crashing down. The SUV sat in my grandfather's driveway like a symbol of everything that had been taken from me, and was finally being returned. I stood at the window watching it, trying to process the emotional whiplash of the past hour. Behind me, my mother had retreated to the kitchen with my grandmother. Their voice is a low murmur of conversation I could not quite make out. My grandfather joined me at the window, his presence solid and reassuring. How are you holding up? I considered the question carefully before answering. I'm not sure. Part of me wants to scream, and part of me feels strangely numb. Like I've been carrying this weight for so long that I forgot it was there, and now that it's been lifted, I don't know how to stand without it. He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the vehicle outside. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. This business with the car, is this the first time something like this has happened, or is there more? The question cracked something open inside me. For years I had minimized the constant small thefts, the redirected gifts, the promises that never materialized. I had told myself it was normal sibling rivalry, that I was being oversensitive, that my mother meant well even when her actions suggested otherwise. But standing there with my grandfather, finally having an ally in my corner, I found I could not keep lying to myself anymore. It's not the first time, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. It's been happening for as long as I can remember. My grandfather turned to face me fully, his expression grave. Tell me. So, I did. I told him about the laptop that was supposed to be my high school graduation gift. The one that ended up in Brooke's room within a month because she needed it more. I told him about the college fund that my grandmother had mentioned contributing to. Money I had never seen because my mother claimed it went towards shared family expenses. I told him about the jewelry that had belonged to my great-grandmother. Pieces that were supposed to be divided equally between us, but somehow all ended up in Brooke's jewelry box. I told him about the smaller things too. Birthday checks that were cashed, but never given to me. Christmas presents that disappeared before I could open them. The savings bond from my christening that my mother cashed when I was 16, telling me the money had been used for emergency car repairs on a vehicle I was never allowed to drive. The more I talked, the more I remembered. It was like pulling a thread on a sweater and watching the entire thing unravel. Years of dismissals and explanations that had never quite made sense, all of them pointing to the same conclusion. I had been systematically robbed by my own mother to fund my sister's lifestyle. The worst part, I said, my voice cracking slightly, is that I actually believed I was the problem. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't worthy of the same love and attention Brooke got. I worked so hard to be independent because I genuinely thought I was a burden, that asking for anything was selfish. My grandfather's jaw tightened, and I saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. How much money are we talking about? Over the years? I had never tried to calculate it before, but now I did the math in my head. The college fund contributions I knew about. The birthday and holiday gifts. The graduation money. The car that was sitting in the driveway. Probably somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000, maybe more. I don't have records of everything because I never knew most of it existed. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled in a way that told me he was suppressing significant anger. I want you to know that this ends today. Whatever has happened in the past cannot be undone, but I can promise you that going forward, anything I give you will go directly to you. No intermediaries, no trust placed in people who have proven themselves untrustworthy. Grandpa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He cut me off gently. I helped create the situation by not verifying things myself, by trusting your mother to do the right thing. I failed you, Hannah, and I intend to make it right. Before I could respond, the sound of a car screeching into the driveway made us both turn toward the window. A silver sedan pulled up behind the tow truck, brakes squealing as it came to an abrupt stop. The driver's door flew open, and Brooke emerged like a force of nature. Her pregnant belly visible even beneath her designer maternity dress. What the hell is going on? She screamed, storming toward the SUV. Why is my car at your house? The tow truck driver, who had been finishing up the paperwork, took one look at the approaching storm, and wisely retreated to his cab. My grandfather opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, his posture commanding despite his age. This car, he said calmly, has never been yours. It was purchased for Hannah. Your mother gave it to you without authorization, and now it's being returned to its rightful owner. Brooke's face contorted with rage. That's insane. Mom told me Grandma and Grandpa wanted me to have it. She said Hannah didn't need a car because she lives near her work and takes the bus. She said it made more sense for me to have it because I have a baby coming. Your mother lied. My grandfather said simply, as she has apparently been lying for years. My mother appeared in the doorway behind him, her face pale and panicked. Brooke, honey, let me explain. Explain what? Brooke shrieked. That you're letting them take my car. After everything you promised? You said this was mine. You said it was a gift. It was a gift, my mother said desperately. Just not originally meant for you. But you needed it, sweetie. You needed it so much more than Hannah did. I was trying to help you. I stepped out onto the porch, placing myself where my sister could see me. Did it ever occur to you to ask me? To tell me about the car and see if I would be willing to share it or let you use it? Did it ever occur to anyone in this family that I might have my own needs, my own struggles, my own life that matters? Brooke's eyes fixed on me, with pure venom. Oh please, Hannah. You've always been so self-righteous. Little Miss Perfect who never needs anything from anyone. You think you're better than us because you work your fancy hotel job and live alone in your sad little apartment. I live that way because I was given no other choice, I said. My voice steady, despite the hurt her words caused. I was never given the support you were given. The confrontation on the porch drew the attention of neighbors who peered through windows and over fences with undisguised curiosity. My grandfather noticed and made a decision, gesturing sharply toward the house. Inside, all of you. This is a family matter, and we will discuss it as a family. Brooke looked ready to argue, but something in his tone made her think better of it. She waddled up the porch steps with exaggerated difficulty, one hand pressed to her lower back in a display of discomfort that I suspected was at least partially theatrical. We reconvened in the living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. My grandmother had emerged from the kitchen, and now sat in her usual chair, her face a mask of disappointment that I had never seen before. It was directed not at me, I realized with a start, but at my mother and sister. Before we continue, my grandfather said, settling into his chair, I want to establish some facts. Patricia, how long have you been redirecting gifts and money intended for Hannah to Brooke instead? My mother's mouth opened and closed several times before she found words. It's not as simple as that. I was managing resources for the whole family. Sometimes things got shifted around based on who needed what. That's not an answer, my grandmother said sharply. How long? The silence stretched painfully. Finally, my mother dropped her gaze to her lap. Since the girls were teenagers, maybe earlier, I don't remember exactly. And approximately how much money and property are we talking about? I don't know, I didn't keep track. Hannah estimates somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000. My grandfather said coldly. Does that sound accurate to you? My mother flinched as if she had been slapped. That's probably high. It can't be that much. Let's see, my grandmother said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through something. I have records of contributions I made over the years, directly to Patricia, to be passed on to both girls equally. College fund contributions, graduation gifts, birthday money. Shall I read the totals? Mother, please. $17,000 sent for Hannah's college fund over 6 years. Where is that money, Patricia? It went toward family expenses, bills and things. Times were hard. Times were hard enough that you bought Brooke a new bedroom set, when she was 16 and took her to Europe for her graduation trip. The question landed like a physical blow. My mother had no response. I remember that trip, I said quietly. I wasn't invited. Mom said it was because I had to work at my summer job and couldn't miss the time. But the real reason was that there was only supposed to be money for one person to go, and that money was supposed to be mine. Brooke rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. Poor Hannah. Always the victim. You could have asked to come. You could have spoken up. I didn't know there was anything to speak up about, I said, turning to face her directly. I thought the trip was paid for by your godparents. That's what Mom told me. She said your godparents wanted to give you a graduation experience, and that my godparents hadn't been as generous. That was true, my mother said weakly. Was it? My grandmother asked. Because as I recall, Hannah's godparents contributed quite nicely to her education fund. The same fund that apparently got spent on family expenses while Brooke was touring Paris. The layers of deception were staggering. Every explanation I had ever been given, every justification for why Brooke had more and I had less was falling apart under scrutiny. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, each revelation knocking down another carefully constructed lie. I want to understand something, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Mom, why? What did I ever do to make you treat me this way? Was it something about me specifically? Or would you have done this to whichever daughter was born first? My mother's face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might actually provide a genuine answer. But then the defensive walls went back up, and she straightened in her seat. I didn't treat you badly. I loved you both equally. I just recognized that Brooke needed more support than you did. You were always so capable, Hannah. So independent. Brooke struggled more. She needed extra help. She struggled because you never let her face consequences, I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. Every time she made a mistake, you covered for her. Every time she wanted something she couldn't afford, you found a way to get it for her. Even if that meant taking it from me. You didn't help her. You crippled her. Brooke's face flushed with anger. Don't you dare talk about me like I'm some kind of charity case. You're pregnant at 20 years old with a husband who can't hold a job, living in a house your mother-in-law owns, driving a car that was stolen from your sister, wearing clothes you can't pay for. How would you describe that? At least I have a family? Brooke shot back. At least I have a husband and a baby on the way. What do you have? A studio apartment and a job folding towels. I manage a hotel, I corrected calmly. A job I earned through hard work and dedication. A job that pays me well enough to support myself without stealing from family members. Enough, my grandfather said, his voice cutting through the argument. Brooke, I want to hear from you. Did you know that the car your mother gave you was intended for Hannah? Brooke hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw the truth. I suspected, she admitted finally. Mom said there was some confusion about who the car was supposed to be for, but that she'd worked it out. She said you and Grandma wanted me to have it because of the baby. And did you question that story? Given that Hannah had never mentioned receiving a car, did it not occur to you that something was wrong? I didn't think about Hannah. I was excited. It was a nice car and I needed it. My grandfather shook his head slowly. The entitlement in this room is astounding. Patricia, you have raised one daughter to believe she deserves nothing, and another to believe she deserves everything. And in doing so, you've damaged them both. My mother began to cry, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her as I had so many times before. She was crying for herself, for being caught, not for what she had done to me. What happens now? I asked. The car situation is resolved, but there's still everything else. My grandfather exchanged a look with my grandmother, some silent communication passing between them. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of decision. Now he said, we start making things right. The next hour was one of the most surreal of my life. My grandfather, methodical and thorough in a way that betrayed his decades of business experience, began cataloging the wrongs that needed to be addressed. He pulled out a notepad and started writing, asking questions and recording answers with the precision of an accountant. The college fund contributions, he said. We'll start there. Margaret and I contributed $17,000 specifically for Hannah's education. Where is that money now? My mother shifted uncomfortably. Like I said, it was used for family expenses over the years. Then you owe Hannah $17,000. We'll set up a payment plan. What? My mother sputtered. I can't pay back $17,000. That's impossible. You'll find a way, my grandfather said calmly. Just as Hannah found a way to pay for her own education without any help from you. Speaking of which, Hannah, how much did you spend on your associate's degree? About $8,000 total, I said. I did community college and worked full-time throughout. $8,000 that should have been covered by the fund we established. He wrote another note. That brings the total to $17,000. Now let's discuss the other gifts. For the next 30 minutes, we went through every birthday, every holiday, every milestone that my grandparents could remember contributing to. The graduation presents, the birthday checks, the Christmas gifts. Each one had a paper trail on my grandparents' end, but no corresponding receipt on mine. By the time we were finished, the unofficial tally was staggering. Over the course of my lifetime, approximately $53,000 in gifts and contributions intended for me had been redirected elsewhere. The majority had gone to supplement Brooke's lifestyle, but a significant portion had simply been absorbed into my parents' household expenses. I had no idea, my grandmother said, her voice trembling. All these years, we thought we were helping both of you equally. We trusted your mother to distribute things fairly. The trust was misplaced, my grandfather said grimly. But that ends now. He turned to face my mother and sister, his expression hard. Here is what's going to happen. The car has been returned to its rightful owner. That situation is resolved. The money that was stolen from Hannah over the years cannot all be repaid immediately, but it will be acknowledged and addressed. Stolen is a strong word, my mother protested weakly. It's the accurate word, my grandmother snapped. You took money that was given to one person and gave it to another without permission. That's theft, Patricia, no matter how you try to dress it up. My grandfather continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. I will be restructuring my estate plans this week. The changes I make will reflect the reality of the situation, not the fiction that has been presented to me for years. Brooke's head snapped up. What does that mean? It means that the anticipated inheritance you've been counting on may look very different than you expected. It means that Hannah will receive appropriate consideration for what has been taken from her. And it means that anyone who has a problem with that arrangement is welcome to contest it, at which point all of this information will become a matter of public record. The threat hung in the air. My mother's face went pale as she processed the implications. You can't do that, she said. You can't punish Brooke for things I did. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm correcting an imbalance that has existed for far too long. My grandfather looked at Brooke with something like pity. You've been set up to fail, young lady. Your mother gave you everything you wanted without teaching you how to work for any of it. Now you're 20 years old, pregnant, married to a man without stable employment. And you've never had to face real consequences for your actions. That changes today. This is insane, Brooke said, her voice rising to a near shriek. I haven't done anything wrong. Mom gave me the car. I thought it was mine. How was I supposed to know? You knew something wasn't right, I said quietly. You admitted as much. But you didn't ask questions because you didn't want to know the answers. That's a choice, Brooke. And choices have consequences. My sister turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Her mascara running in dark streaks. I'm your sister. How can you do this to me while I'm having a baby? Your niece or nephew. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I felt a twist of emotion in my chest. But I forced myself to stay strong. It means a lot to me. And when that baby is born, I'll be the best aunt I can be. But that doesn't mean I'll let you continue to take from me. It doesn't mean I'll keep being the one who sacrifices while you benefit. I never asked you to sacrifice anything. You never had to ask. Mom made sure of that. But even when you knew something was wrong, when you suspected that the car wasn't really meant for you, you said nothing. You took what was offered and didn't question it. That's not innocent, Brooke. That's complicit. The word hung in the air. Heavy with implication. Brooke looked like she wanted to argue further, but her mother placed a hand on her arm, silencing her. What do you want, Hannah? My mother asked. Her voice defeated. What will make this right? I considered the question carefully. What did I want? Not the money. Not really. I had built a life without it, and I could continue to do so. Not revenge. Despite how satisfying it would be to watch them suffer the way I had suffered. I want acknowledgement, I said finally. I want you to admit what you did. Not just to me, but to everyone who's been told stories about how equal and fair you've been. I want you to stop lying about our family dynamic to make yourself look good. My mother's face crumpled. And I want boundaries. I continued. Real boundaries. No more expecting me to give up things for Brooke. No more guilt trips about not being close enough to the family while you systematically exclude me from it. If I choose to help Brooke in the future, it will be my choice. Not something taken from me. That's fair, my grandfather said approvingly. More than fair, actually. I looked at my grandmother, who had tears in her eyes. And I want a relationship with you both. A real one. Not one filtered through Mom's interpretation of events. My grandmother rose from her chair and crossed to me, pulling me into a tight embrace. You've always had that, sweetheart. We just didn't realize it was being kept from you. I held on to her, feeling the first stirrings of healing begin to take root. Outside the window, my SUV sat in the driveway, gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was just a car, really. Just metal, and rubber, and glass. But it represented so much more than that. It represented the truth finally being told. And that was worth more than any amount of money. The week that followed the confrontation at my grandfather's house was one of the strangest of my life. For the first time, I had possession of something I had been given, rather than something I had earned through grueling effort. The SUV sat in the parking lot of my apartment complex, a constant reminder that things had finally shifted. But with the shift came turbulence. My phone became a battleground. Brooke sent dozens of messages, ranging from tearful pleas to angry accusations. My mother called repeatedly, alternating between apologies and attempts to negotiate some compromise that would return things to the way they were. I responded to none of them. My father, who had been notably absent from the confrontation, finally reached out on the fourth day. Your mother is beside herself, he said. When I answered the phone, his voice carried the tired resignation I had heard from him my entire life. The sound of a man who had long ago given up trying to change anything. Then maybe she should think about why, I replied calmly. Hannah, this is tearing the family apart. Brooke isn't sleeping. She's worried about the baby. Can't you find it in your heart to let this go? I felt the old familiar pull. The instinct to smooth things over, to be the peacemaker, to sacrifice my own needs for the comfort of others. But I recognized it now for what it was. A survival mechanism that no longer served me. Dad, do you know how much money was taken from me over the years? Do you know about the college fund? The gifts? The car? His silence told me everything I needed to know. You knew, I said. The realization hitting me like a punch to the stomach. You knew and you said nothing. I tried to bring it up a few times, but your mother always had reasons. She said you were fine, that you didn't need as much support as Brooke. I wanted to keep the peace. You wanted to avoid conflict. I corrected. There's a difference. Keeping the peace would have meant standing up for fairness. What you did was enable injustice to avoid uncomfortable conversations. That's harsh. It's accurate. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm not going to act like everything is fine when it isn't. If that tears the family apart, then maybe the family was already broken. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly as I set the phone down. Every conversation, every confrontation, chipped away at the narrative I had been fed my entire life. I wasn't the difficult one. I wasn't the one who refused to be part of the family. I was the one who had been systematically excluded while being blamed for the distance. That afternoon, I drove my SUV to my grandfather's house. He had asked me to come by to discuss something important, and I found myself nervous in a way I hadn't expected. The last time I had been this nervous around family, I had been waiting to find out if I would be punished for something Brooke had done and blamed on me. But this was different. My grandfather met me at the door with a warm smile and ushered me into his study. A room filled with leather-bound books and the smell of wood polish. "Thank you for coming," he said, settling into the chair behind his desk. "I wanted to discuss some changes I'm making, and I wanted you to hear about them directly from me." "Changes to your will," I guessed. He nodded. "Among other things. I've spoken with my attorney, and we've restructured my estate plan to reflect reality rather than the fiction your mother created. But, more importantly, I wanted to talk to you about the future." "My future?" "Your potential, Hannah. I've been doing some research." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "Your performance reviews at the hotel have been exceptional. Your manager speaks highly of you. You've been promoted twice in 2 years, and you're on track for further advancement." I opened the folder, confused. Inside were copies of documents I had never seen, performance evaluations and commendations from my workplace. "How did you get these?" I made some inquiries. "I hope you don't mind." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "You've accomplished remarkable things without any support from your family. I want to change that. I want to invest in your future, not as compensation for what was taken, but because you've proven you deserve investment." My eyes filled with unexpected tears. "Grandpa, you don't have to do this." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Your grandmother and I have discussed it, and we want to set up an educational fund for you. If you want to pursue a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, additional certifications, whatever will help your career, we want to support that." I don't know what to say. "Say yes." He said simply, "Say yes, and let us be the family we should have been all along." For the first time in years, I felt myself truly believe that good things could happen to me without being taken away. 3 months passed, and my life transformed in ways I could never have predicted. The educational fund my grandparents established allowed me to enroll in an online bachelor's program in hospitality management, something I had dreamed of pursuing, but never thought possible. The SUV made my commute easier, and opened opportunities that had been closed to me before. For the first time in my memory, I was building a life with support, rather than despite opposition. My relationship with my mother and Brooke remained fractured. After weeks of unanswered messages, they had largely stopped reaching out. My father occasionally sent brief texts, checking in without expecting responses. I appreciated the minimal effort, even as I recognized it for what it was. The same passive approach he had always taken now directed slightly more in my direction. The baby arrived in March, a healthy girl named Stella. I found out through social media rather than a phone call, which hurt more than I wanted to admit. But I sent a gift anyway, a beautiful handmade blanket, and a note that made clear my door was open if they wanted to rebuild, but only on terms of mutual respect. My grandparents kept me informed about the family dynamics I was no longer directly part of. Brooke and her husband were struggling, which was not surprising given their pattern of living beyond their means. The loss of the SUV had forced them to actually budget for transportation, a concept apparently foreign to someone who had always had things handed to her. My mother continued to try to funnel resources their way, but my grandfather had become vigilant, making sure that anything intended for me actually reached me. "She asked us for money last week," my grandmother told me during one of our now regular phone calls, said it was for household expenses. "But your grandfather suspects it would have ended up with Brooke." "Did you give it to her?" "We gave her exactly what she asked for, with the condition that she provided receipts for what it was spent on." She wasn't happy about that, but she agreed. I appreciated their newfound skepticism, even as it saddened me that it was necessary. My mother had made her choices, and those choices had consequences that extended far beyond me. Work continued to be my sanctuary. The hotel promoted me to night manager, a position that came with a significant raise and more responsibility. My general manager pulled me aside after the announcement and told me that she was impressed by my dedication and professionalism. "You handle difficult guests better than anyone I've ever worked with," she said. "And I've noticed that you never seem to let personal issues affect your work. That's rare." I thanked her, not mentioning that my ability to remain calm under pressure had been honed through years of managing family crises that were never my fault, but always somehow my responsibility to fix. The spring semester of my bachelor's program went well. I found that I genuinely enjoyed studying hospitality management theory, connecting the academic concepts to the practical experience I had accumulated. My professors were impressed by my real-world knowledge, and I earned straight A's for the first time in my life. In May, I received an unexpected invitation. Brooke reached out through email, the first direct communication we had had since the confrontation. "I'd like to talk," she wrote. "Not to ask for anything, just to talk. I think I owe you an apology." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the protective distance I had established. But another part remembered that Brooke was also a product of our mother's manipulation, raised to believe that taking from me was acceptable and even expected. "Coffee next weekend," I wrote back. "Public place, no mom." Her response came within minutes. "Thank you. I'll be there." We met at a cafe near my apartment. Neutral ground where neither of us had history. Brooke looked exhausted in the way all new mothers do, with dark circles under her eyes and formula stains on her shirt. But she also looked different somehow, more grounded than I had ever seen her. "Before you say anything," she began, "I want to acknowledge what happened. Not just with the car but with everything. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the baby was born. And I've realized that I've spent my entire life being handed things that I didn't earn." I waited, letting her continue without interruption. "Mom always told me that I deserved special treatment because I was more fragile than you. She said you were so strong and independent that you didn't need help." I believed her because it was easier to believe than to question what I was getting. And now, Brooke's eyes filled with tears. "Now I have a daughter, and I think about what I would want for her. I wouldn't want her to be like me, dependent on other people's sacrifices. I would want her to be like you, capable and self-sufficient." The admission hit harder than I expected. "That means a lot, Brooke. I can't undo what happened. I know that. But I want to do better going forward. I want my daughter to have a relationship with her aunt, a real one. Not one poisoned by mom's favoritism." I looked at my sister, really looked at her for perhaps the first time in our adult lives, and I saw potential for something new. The reconciliation with Brooke was slow and careful, built on conversations rather than assumptions. We established boundaries that we actually respected, a novel concept for both of us. She began therapy to work through the entitlement that had been ingrained in her since childhood. I supported her efforts without enabling her old patterns. Our mother struggled with the new dynamic. She couldn't understand why her daughters needed boundaries, why they couldn't simply return to the way things were. But the way things were had been toxic, and we were no longer willing to participate in toxicity. She called me yesterday, crying about how the family has fallen apart. Brooke told me during one of our now regular coffee dates, Stella dozed in her carrier between us. A peaceful presence that somehow made difficult conversations easier. "What did you tell her?" "That the family hasn't fallen apart. It's just restructured into something healthier." Brooke smiled wryly. She didn't appreciate that perspective. 6 months after the confrontation at my grandfather's house, something significant happened. My mother reached out, requesting a family meeting at my grandparents' home. She wanted to apologize, she said. She wanted to make amends. I was skeptical, but agreed to attend. My grandparents, Brooke with Stella, and my parents all gathered in the same living room where the truth had first emerged. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile. My mother stood in the center of the room, looking older and more fragile than I had ever seen her. "I've done a lot of thinking," she began, her voice wavering. And I've come to realize that I hurt you, Hannah. Not just once but repeatedly. Over many years. I remained silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I told myself I was helping Brooke. But really, I was projecting my own insecurities onto both of you. I saw myself in Brooke's struggles, and I saw everything I wished I could be in your independence, Hannah. Instead of celebrating you, I punished you for being capable. The admission was more than I had expected. I looked at my grandmother, who nodded slightly, encouraging me to respond. Why are you saying this now? I asked. Because I almost lost everything, my mother said simply. My relationship with both my daughters, my parents' trust, my self-respect. And I realized that if I kept making excuses, I would lose it all permanently. She approached me slowly, hesitantly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I haven't earned that yet, but I'm asking for a chance to earn it. I've started seeing a therapist. I'm working on understanding why I did what I did, and how to make different choices. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw the fear beneath the regret. She was terrified of losing her family, and that fear was driving her to finally face the truth. Okay, I said quietly. A chance. One chance. The relief on her face was immediate and profound. Thank you. I won't waste it. The months that followed were not easy. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, and moments when I questioned whether reconciliation was even possible. But slowly, painfully, something new began to grow from the ashes of what had been burned away. My mother actually followed through on her promises. She attended therapy regularly, made amends where she could, and most importantly, stopped making excuses. When Brooke needed help, my mother now offered support that came from her own resources, rather than redirecting from me. My father remained largely the same, passive and conflict-averse, but he too made small efforts. He started calling me directly, rather than waiting for my mother to relay information. He asked about my classes, my work, my life, in ways he never had before. A year after the SUV confrontation, I graduated from my online bachelor's program with honors. My grandparents, my parents, and Brooke with Stella all attended the small celebration at my grandfather's house. The years of theft and deception had taken their toll on my family. My mother's reputation among extended relatives was permanently damaged when the truth came out, and she lost several close friendships with people who could not overlook what she had done. Brooke's husband eventually found stable work, but their marriage struggled under the weight of financial stress and the need to actually budget rather than rely on my mother's redirected resources. The inheritance they had counted on was restructured to reflect fairness rather than favoritism. And they were forced to build their own lives rather than coasting on stolen gifts. My mother's relationship with her parents never fully recovered to what it had been, and she carried the weight of their disappointed awareness for the rest of her life. As I stood in my grandfather's living room, diploma in hand, looking at the family that had finally learned to treat me with respect, I allowed myself to feel proud, not just of the degree, but of the journey that had led me here. Driving home that evening in my SUV, the one my grandfather had given me and my mother had tried to steal, I thought about everything that had changed. I had gone from being invisible to being seen, from being robbed to being supported, from being alone to being part of something real. The revenge I had gotten was not the dramatic, satisfying kind from movies. It was quieter, more profound. It was the revenge of living well, of building a life that proved I had always been worthy of love and support and respect. And as I pulled into my parking space and looked up at the apartment I had earned through my own hard work, I knew that this was just the beginning. I had spent my whole life being the one who lost everything to her sister. Now, finally, I was the one who had won.